Thank you. Okay, so there are very many questions. I'll try to organize them a little bit. There is a very important question. Yes, we can all gather all the speakers, please, to the screen. That'd be very helpful. Thank you. And there is a first question about state aid and the guidelines. And I think the consultation has just finished. The European Commission is consulting on the new guidelines, state aid on and renewables. Giles, the question is for you. Do you expect any changes in the framework for state aid going forward?
We do not expect radical changes. There may be some minor changes, and they will probably go in the direction of making it easier for governments to spend public money on the energy transition. The politics in Brussels, in the EU, in the European Commission at the moment are very much on the side of helping governments deal with the huge public policy challenges that they currently face, arguably greater than in any time in the EU's history. Challenges from the public health crisis, the need for economic recovery, and the huge urgency around the energy transition and the digital transition. And all of that requires governments to be spending more money, not less. And therefore, the state aid guidelines, not just on energy and environment, but on everything, need to be made a little bit more flexible. That's the general feeling in Brussels.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. There is a question from Mr. Asimakis from Reed Smith, and it's a comment as well as a question. And he basically says this: it seems there is consensus, and I refer to what was said earlier in the earlier session, that there really have to be two sections. There are two sessions to the process. First is the planning, the developer selecting from a wider zone the specific location, and that also has to do with the interconnection, the environment, the fisheries, tourism, navigation, military, radars, and so on. So you have to give them an exclusive right to develop that zone or to select from within a zone. And then the second stage is the competition with the contracts for difference, but that also has to have a qualitative assessment of the technological project. So two stages. First, design, where the developers need exclusive rights or land rights or sea maritime zone rights, exclusive rights. So there has to be a selection process. And the second process is where the government or a body, RAE, IPED, who knows, selects the developers that are going to go forward for full permitting, and they're given the licenses, so to speak, at a price. So there is a quality, technology section and price section in the middle. Now, do people agree that this is the way forward? I think there is some kind of consensus that you do need to start allocating exclusive zones, broader zones. The developer then will choose. Is that a reliable system? A question I'm asking about this model is the risks, the regulatory risks and permitting risks for the developers, which I saw in the Vanguard case last week. I don't know if people are aware that the Vanguard project in East Anglia has been held up by High Court decision. One of my colleagues at Francis Terrell Building was acting for the claimants, I must say, Ned Westaway. And he scored a famous victory because the point there was that the substation deep inland that was going to be built was very large. But the failure of the design is that there are going to be two of those. And the developers split. There are two developers, in fact. The two projects are split. And the environmental assessment didn't look at the cumulative effects. When you have two of those, it's much larger. It has bigger impact. And it's the substation, not the actual maritime installations or the cables. It's actually the substation inland that caused the problem there. So it's a complicated question, but there are very many regulatory risks, environmental permitting risks. Is it enough to start with merely giving the right to develop and have the contract for difference in the middle? Or is there another design? Maybe you have to bite the bullet and actually give full permit at the very beginning and a price at the very beginning. So reward the risk takers early on so that they can go ahead and invest a lot of money and a lot of planning. Are there any thoughts about this? I'm sorry, it's a very complicated question, but are there any thoughts about the design that people want to? If you raise your hand, I'll give you the floor. Giles, yes.
I think the wind industry would generally say on this, run the CFD auction as late as possible so that the permits have already been acquired, as many of them as possible, and so that the residual development risk after the CFD auction is as low as possible.
Yes, ο κύριος Οικονόμου. Δεν σας ακούμε.
Yes, I will continue in Greek since this is the rule for this panel.
No, it's your choice. It's up to you.
Okay. Okay. Due to our international guests, I would like to make clear that the regulatory framework is not yet set. But so what we need to do is to have the will. So we've heard our minister this morning that there is a will. So what we will all provide him, we will provide him the way. So we will advise the Ministry of Environment and Energy what is best that should be done for Greece. So the minister will probably propose to the council to have the best solutions for our environment, for our, I mean, when I say environment, I mean ecological, financial, and territorial, whatever aspects this covers. So from our side, from the Center for Renewable Energy Sources, we try to see technical issues, to see floating, fixed bed. We try to see the costs, and we try to advise in the best way. So who will finally have the rights and the seabed rights? This is something that will be developed and decided and set. So that's all I want to limit for the moment. So nothing is open. There is a will, and there will be the way to determine, based on our local characteristics, what is best to be done, but it should be done. Thank you.
George, yes, you have the floor.
I'm happy to add on this question, and I have to qualify that we have not financed offshore wind in Greece, but using our experience of trying to promote renewable in new markets. I mean, the model that we described, whether you can provide an administrative set fitting tariff, is good to start a market when there are a lot of risks unknown and a lot of technological and a number of challenges, and even the local legislation, for example, the permit legislation have not reached to the states. All the authorities that need to provide permit have not also matured in their level of understanding on how to address issues of a new technology. We have the experience. This model can work when you have a number of those risks, so, and you want to provide the first results and open the industry. But then, as the sort of all the maturity at all levels advances, then of course you move, as Giles described earlier, to the model that developers are taking more risks. Everyone, permitting is can proceed faster, and then you do the auction with one target for the auction being the price. You don't. If you have given a lot of developers rights to develop, you've already passed, let's call it the technological or experience stage to qualify, giving the right to develop, and then you only compete for price. You don't add a second, and you do it as late as possible. But to reach that stage, you need, of course, to have a lot of people developing. So either you go and develop a lot of sites and you invite people and you do a lot of preparation as a state on that, or you go with the first option. So it's a choice that you make.
Can I ask those of you involved in the finance, at what stage are you happy to lend money to a project or to a developer? I mean, obviously, if they don't have the contract for difference, what is it? I mean, how? I mean, it's all it can go nowhere. So, at what level do you think the project will be mature to receive any funding?
I mean, when they come to us is usually when they need the money to start construction. To start construction, even the investor will need to secure the contract for the remuneration. So when they come to us, it's quite late in the process. And also for us to be able to do the due diligence, we need to have a number of the, I would say, preparatory work already undertaken. So when they come to access financing for the construction, a lot of those issues have already been resolved.
And there's a question from Mr. Nezeritis and sort of point of view of the Greek banks. The question is, how open will you be to get working with banks from elsewhere in Europe, or pension funds or other forms of funding, or I don't know,
Of course.
loans funding?
Okay. 4 years ago, there were very limited investors in the renewable sector in Greece, limited only to local players and very, very few international ones. Currently, there are more 25 international investors, infrastructure funds looking for projects in Greece. I personally, I have met in the last 12 months more than 25 infrastructure funds and players who want to do business in Greece in the renewables, not only offshore wind, of course, in the renewables. So in the equity part, we see international investors coming back into the market. Now, regarding the debt financing, usually banks are more, slow in anticipating risks and this kind of stuff. So currently, the local banking institutions that they strongly support renewable projects. I can speak in detail for Alpha Bank, but I know that the same applies for other banks as well. And of course, with the very, very fruitful help of EBRD and EIB, but I will say mainly EBRD has supported the sector very much, and so of course we are happy to work with international lenders. We used to work with international lenders before the Greek crisis. There were plenty of international lenders big present in Greece, so we're hoping that they'll come back. At least for the equity side, there are many international ones. Let's wait for the debt trends to follow.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're out of time. Final question is something Professor Zervos raised: the hydrogen revolution. Does anybody want to address the issue? Are you pessimistic or optimistic? Can we speak about hybrid stations, green hydrogen in the next 10 years? Okay, Mr. Economo, yes.
Yes, actually, I am a member of the committee that the minister has appointed, led by Professor Kapros and the distinguished people there. We very soon, as it was said, that the Hellenic national strategy will be in place, and as Professor Zervos said, the issue is the cost. So we evaluate all grades of hydrogen, giving priority to green hydrogen. However, regardless the technology that hydrogen is coming, infrastructure to accommodate hydrogen gas and liquid, it will be developed independent of the shade of hydrogen that will be used. And also industry, energy-intensive industries can be prepared to accommodate in their process this fuel. And we try to be compliant with the European strategy on hydrogen. So we take this into consideration. So soon, as it was said by Herbert, maybe earlier, the ministry will present the results. Let's see. We are working on that. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, Giles.
Renewable hydrogen has a role to play in the decarbonisation of the energy system. That is absolutely clear. But if there is an industrial process in an energy-intensive industry, or if there is something in heating or transport that can be electrified directly with electricity, rather than being decarbonised indirectly with renewable hydrogen, then it will always make sense to electrify it directly because of the energy efficiency advantages of electrification over other forms of decarbonisation. But we can't electrify everything. That is absolutely clear.
Shipping or aviation.
Yeah. And some industrial processes.
Yeah.
Very short point at the end there, just to note that we have a market problem with hydrogen, and the announcement by Yara, the fertilizer producer, only a few weeks ago, that they will now transition away from natural gas in their nitrogen production into electrolysis in the next years should create a market, a subsidized market that is, for industrial use of hydrogen in Europe. So things are happening, but there is a cost issue, obviously.
Right, I'm afraid we have to leave it at that. I'm immensely grateful to all the hard work I've seen people put on the presentations and the talks. This was a fantastic session. Thank you all very much. Σας ευχαριστώ όλους πάρα πολύ για τον χρόνο σας. Ευχαριστώ πολύ όσους παρακολουθήσατε. Ζητώ συγγνώμη σε όσους δεν μπόρεσα να αναπαράγω τις ερωτήσεις σας. Είναι πάρα πολλές. Προσπάθησα να τις κάνω μια περίληψη. Ευχαριστώ όλους τους ομιλητές και ευχαριστώ ξανά την ΕΛΕΤΕΝ για την ευκαιρία που μας έδωσε. Ευχαριστώ.